Today let's talk about how to prepare and plan a painting. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to touch upon a different topic, and that is how my different paintings come to be, how I prepare for them, how I plan along, because of course sometimes it's not just about a landscape that you discover in real life and decide to do a plein air with. Sometimes they demand a little bit more of a preparation, more sketching beforehand, more compositional work and stuff like that. So I wanted to give you an example because, as it turned out, I had just the right one in mind now. Also, I'm very sorry for the lighting. The weather is quite undecided today, so it rains, then it's big sunshine, then it's the apocalypse all over again. Try to not be distracted by the lighting. So, back to our topic. As you might remember, a couple of months ago, actually last year now, I have done a video on how to stay inspired, and one of the techniques that I talked about was reading different types of book, of course. And well, what I also frequently do is I buy artist albums, and not just artist albums, because I feel like if we are speaking about the old masters and very classical painters, I do have a decent collection, but ever so often there is a thematic exhibition, for instance, happening somewhere in the world, and they do a catalogue of it. Or sometimes it's not an exhibition per se, but let's say some art historian who has done research and has come up with a new take on a particular topic or something. Long story short, last year, when I strolled through my local bookstore, I came across this little number, which is called The Myth in Art, or Mythology in Art, however you would want to translate this. And while there are definitely some oldies and goodies in there that are pretty well known, quite some of the paintings included in this collection were new to me. Amongst which, one very interesting one that I would want to share with you today. Here I came across this particular painting by Baldwin Green, which is called Mercure, so Mercury. And honestly, I do appreciate the Renaissance period in art so much that I was a little bit surprised for not having heard anything about this painter until now. What of course is extremely striking here is the format of this painting, which uses a panoramic format to do a portrait painting. And I couldn't even believe it first and was like, maybe this is the editor's choice, right? But then this clearly states it's nearly 2 meters by 64 centimeters, so this is really the format that this was done in. And thus it creates such a beautiful elongated line for the figure in this painting being Hermes or Mercury. It's funny how everything is framed as well, because I would not expect a painter to compose the painting in a way that would cut off his elbow and still be quite harmonious, because you have plenty of space to put the different animals around here and place the different elements that would constitute this painting. If you take a closer look into it, and I will try and see whether I can zoom you in, you could clearly see that there are a lot of fun details included here. For instance, you have a running cat, I believe, here, and a sitting hare between his hand and his body. We have a castle placed in the far-off mountains, some slight details that add so much depth and interest to this painting. And of course, we can also talk about the color scheme here, which is very representative for the Renaissance era, where we have a very clearly illuminated, well, human figure, I was about to say, or god here, of the Greek mythology, but be it as it may, a figure that is very much in the highlight, very much in the light, that is the center of interest in the painting. And then you have a darker background, especially the floor where the figure is standing on, and then we have, of course, the effect of everything becoming quite blue when going into the horizon. That is frequently taken very literal in the Renaissance art by doing the backdrop of the landscape literally in blue. And for quite some time I was really obsessed with this painting. I thought back to it quite frequently and regularly, and it haunted me in a way, and my brain just didn't come around to what to do with this information. Until one day I somehow stumbled upon an engraving that I was already familiar with, but that I have forgotten all about, and I will share the image on the screen. It is attributed to the French artist Jacques Lemoine. Originally it was thought to be a North American native, but further research has shown that it actually is a representation of how he imagines an early inhabitant of the British Isles to look like, namely a woman warrior of the Pictish tribe. And as you might be aware, the Picts were a native people to what is today Scotland, in around the Iron Age and the early medieval period. This is also the people that the Romans fought against when they first came to the British Isles. The fun fact here being them being called Picts because their bodies were covered in blue paint when they went to war. It stems from the Latin word picti, meaning painted or tattooed people. This is in no way a historically accurate representation of the Picts, of course. As the sources show, the Picts covered themselves in paint in relation to their war practices, not for aesthetical reasons, right? And Lemoine, representing this warrior woman with floral tattoos, just seems incredibly unlikely, because in no way are florals related to any, symbols that were supposed to protect warriors from death on the battlefield. Adding to this, he was like an illustrator of the 17th, 16th century, and at that time florals were really very popular in Western Europe. So there's this, and it was probably his way of working a topic that is very popular for that time into a historical representation. So make of it what you will. I'm not here for the historical accuracy neither. I just found it incredibly beautiful, and I really personally like this juxtaposition between the image of a female warrior, first of all, and secondly those florals that cover her body that make it a very feminine symbol, although it is still a female warrior, if you get my meaning. This is a contrast that I very much like. Now, why I'm telling you this, it's because these two references somehow clicked in my head, and I was, okay, actually, I know what to do with the inspiration that this Mercury painting had on me and how to repurpose this. And this is how the idea was born of a painting in a panoramic format, representing a Pictish warrior in the Scottish Highlands. So I went out to my local art supply store and found a canvas that was the exact right format for what I had in mind. As you can see, this is not a classical portrait format in the least. It is a panoramic canvas, but nowhere near as dramatic and as tapered, as slim, let's say, as my reference painting. I just didn't feel like I would pull it off. I didn't feel confident enough to make it as slim as that. The goal here is not to reproduce this painting exactly with just another human figure in there, but to make this concept yours and giving you sometimes just the tiny fire that suffices in order to ignite your ideas, all right? So this will be my take on this whole theme and this whole format. I found something that is a panorama, that isn't a classical portrait format, but something which I feel comfortable working with. Now, my second questioning was, how will I paint this? Because I didn't want it to be extremely realistic. At the same point, I would have wanted the reference to the Renaissance painting be quite explicit. So at the end of the day, I decided to go for the figure being more Renaissance styled and the background being more symbolist inspired and in the more usual style that I use for my landscape painting. So something fairly colorful, something a bit textured, and something with bright and vivid colors. Of course, to have that Renaissance reference right, I needed to do some, not research because I know the style, I'm familiar with it, but to do rather a deep dive into how exactly I can achieve this effect through the color schemes, but also through proportions. I really wanted to accentuate even further these very feminine and floral aspects to the woman warrior figure, so I did not want her to be as masculinely built, let's say, as it is the case in Lemoine's drawing, right, or illustration. And therefore I had an idea of going back to one of the most symbolic Renaissance painter figures, which is none other than Botticelli. And I hope this will be all right with YouTube and I don't have to censor like her breasts, because this is still art, so I feel like we should be good here, but one can never know. We will see how this video will be flagged or not. Now, when it comes to Botticelli, of course, we all know a certain amount of paintings, especially The Birth of Venus, but the figure that came in mind when thinking about this particular project that I'm about to present you was maybe a less known one that I have seen at a Parisian exhibition last year or 2 years ago. Let me check when this was organized. Do we know? Does it say from when it was? No, from 2 years ago. See, this was an exhibition that took place in the Museum of Jacques Marandré in Paris from the 10th September 21 to 24th of January in 2022. So quite an older one. This is maybe also why it slipped my mind. But this is the painting in question that I thought would be interesting to use as a frame of reference for the painting of the female warrior. So it is Venus Pudica, and it is otherwise exhibited in Berlin. So I must have seen it in Berlin years and years ago as well, but I don't know, it just completely slipped my mind. But I thought that the way that the light is falling onto her body and the way that her skin is painted is a bit more tender, smooth, less dramatic maybe than in the Birth of Venus painting, which is basically, as you can see, the same posture in a way, in the same face. Obviously it was the same sitter, but I do feel that the difference in the way of painting both is quite notable. Here the light being more, maybe a bit more greenish, a bit more contrasty, and a bit more statue-like, if you will, whereas here we have something a little bit more on the softer side. So this is what I want to go for, and this is the overall effect that I would like to achieve when painting my Pictish warrior. Now, as to the part of the sketch, as I will have to experiment with a lot of different variations of one and the same painting through the different landscapes, I felt like it would save me a lot of time to do it digitally and not draw it manually and physically, like on paper and stuff. I will not go into the details of how I achieved everything, because this is not supposed to be a lesson on Photoshop, but to walk you through my process here. The things that I started with were like the figure of Botticelli's Venus, which I isolated through the magic of Photoshop. Then we have the drawing done by Lemoine of this Pictish warrior, and as you can see, there is a slight similarity in their postures, which really helped me envision everything more clearly. So this is what I've started with, and painting everything in digitally, this is what I ended up with. Of course, her arm still looks a little awkward. This is supposed to be a really quick sketch where I fixed things that I needed fixing in order to give me a clear idea of the source of inspiration that I will be working with. Of course, I will not follow the sketch religiously, right? This is just to give me a first idea of where we can go with this and how the overall thing would look. I then created the tattoo inspired by the illustration of Lemoine that I made an overlay of. And then finally, and this is why I told you that I prefer to work digitally here, is that I experimented with a certain number of digital paintings of landscapes that I did in order to help me, you know, find the right mood and the right colorway, maybe the right composition. This is the one that I ended up with, because I feel like the colorway is maybe the one that highlights the figure the best, and also the landscape that I felt was most representative of the Scottish Highlands, where you have both the mountains, but I also included some lochs here and the cliffs, and also some nice greenery. I believe that this is what I will stick with, and this will be, let's say, the mood board that I will work with. So as you can see, sometimes the inspiration really comes from without, and it's not by observing nature or reading a story, or I don't know, watching a movie or something, but sometimes the inspiration simply comes from going to museums, artists' albums. Sometimes the inspiration is other artists' creations, confronted with our own aesthetical beliefs, our own history, and our own sensitivities. This sometimes gives birth to something entirely different. And what I particularly like when this happens is that it really is a beneficial spiral of art, recreating new art and keeping the whole creative machine going in a way, right? And making this artistic community something that is endlessly inspiring and endlessly fruitful. And this concludes our session for today, where I hope I answered your questions concerning how I go about preparing for my paintings and how the different ideas fall into one place when I am preparing a painting, or when I have a special topic or subject in mind that I think about how to get onto a canvas, right? I will probably publish another video once I get there with how I paint this particular work, and yeah, I believe I will do it in the form of a time lapse, but time will tell. Anyway, I hope that you like this little episode, and as always, I hope to see you in my next video very soon. Until then, I wish you all a very happy morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Cheers!